Okay, so my speech was pharmaceutical drug ads are harmful to the general public, and his secondary claims are drug ads are becoming far too common, pharmaceutical drug ads put the user at risk, and United States regulations lag behind other nations. So Ryan's argument is undermined by his lack of statistic data, quotes that are irrelevant to his secondary claim or tool to be used, and refusing to address any counter-arguments. So the first secondary claim is drug ads are becoming far too common. So his first quote talks about the increase in ads shown with data, and the same article, he just goes on to talk about how when it comes to cramming many side effects as possible into a commercial, the FDA suggests only adding in the major ones could help consumers pay more attention. They want to make the commercials convey an accurate view of the drug and communicate better with the viewers. So with this increase in drug ads is also coming an increase in communication of what they could cause, so consumers can make a more educated decision if it is worth it or not to take these drugs. The second quote he uses talks about an increase in spending percentage from the 1990s. Another quote from the same exact source is, but drug advertising is not all about deception. It can offer helpful information if you know what to look for. Advertisements can offer information on drugs that may help many older men, especially those who have conditions that may be tough to treat or manage, such as diabetes and hypertension. Ads can help men learn what's available and spur them to strike up a conversation with their doctor. Such engagement can definitely be a good thing. Without drug ads, these conversations would never happen between doctors and their patients, and that would lead to less people finding solutions to help them with their illnesses. His secondary claim is pharmaceutical drug ads put the users at risk. The first piece of evidence he uses is the fen-phen, which is an article dated 1997, which is just way too long ago to use as any real evidence. Next is he picks one statistic of very many from this source, specifically about the misinformation on drug ads to prove his point that they can be misleading. The quote is 63% of physicians agree that direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical advertising misinforms patients. Alongside this statistic is a statistic saying 64% of physicians agree that direct-to-consumer pharmaceutical advertising promotes patient dialogue with healthcare provider. So while a majority believe they misinform patients, a majority also agree that they talk more with their patients. And as doctors, they should be doing their jobs to better inform the patient of the risks and benefits of this certain drug, and if the person is a good candidate or they would be better off with another solution. This would in turn make the misinformed patient very informed on this decision. His third claim is the United States regulation lag behind other nations. First off, the US does not lag behind them. We still have drug advertisements because there's no need to eliminate them in our country as of right now. Drawing comparisons between countries with vastly different cultures doesn't accurately show whether or not drug ads cause more harm than good. His first quote is, the United States and New Zealand are the only two countries that allow such ads. And until 1997, the practice didn't occur stateside. The FDA regulations dating back to 1967 stipulated that pharmaceutical advertising must present a fair balance of both the risks and benefits of the drug and mention every risk associated with the product. Broadcast commercials would have been cumbersome, so ads were generally limited to print. This does nothing to draw comparisons with other countries. It's simply talking about the regulations the FDA puts on commercials and saying how the US and New Zealand are the only two that have it legal. How does this show that we are behind other countries in any way? In his last quote, he uses the quote, in Japan, the MHLW prohibits prescription drug advertising and promotion to consumers. However, disease awareness advertising and promotion to consumers is permitted, so long as there are no product or brand mentions included within the advertising. That is one way of handling drug advertisement, but nowhere in it is a statistic showing that this is more effective at limiting unnecessary drug usage. It's just the law in Japan.
Did you have that outline to give me? All right, the structural stuff is all fine. On the first point, I think you've got an interesting explanation about how it actually increases consumers. It gives them greater data and an opportunity to understand some of the things that are available to them. It improves the conversation between consumers and their doctors. I think that argument comes up again with your later information on the second point. The notion that people are put at risk, like you kind of dismissed the one example they have as being old, and I think there should be a more specific challenge to the absence of any contemporary examples. And in fact, if there is new medications that have impacted people's lives in a favorable way, and part of the way they got to those new drugs was through advertising, I think that would help your argument a little bit. So I think you're missing an opportunity by pointing out that their evidence uses a case that's 20 years old, and here's some information that shows that contemporary advertising has produced benefits for people. I think you put a stark contrast between your position and the advocate's position. The analysis of the evidence that talked about how doctors feel about these things, I thought was pretty reasonable. The doctors feel that patients are sometimes misinformed by the advertising, but the question about being misinformed is one of those things that promotes the discussion, and then you kind of make the inference that they can correct that misinformation as a result of the conversation that they wouldn't have had otherwise. I think that's a reasonable interpretation. I think you could use a little bit more information to support that point, but I think the inference that you're making seems relatively sound. And then on the third point, you kind of suggest, well, that doesn't show that there is any particular harm. I like the challenge that you make at the end that says there's nothing that shows that Japan's laws are more effective at preventing harms. There's an absence of information, just that they have different laws. In fact, you might even say that the United States and New Zealand are ahead of everybody else in terms of providing information to consumers, whereas everybody else restricts the information to consumers and puts all the power in the hands of doctors who are not necessarily having appropriate conversations with their patients. So I think that's the way you want to go about it, because you've made that argument earlier in the speech. All right, thank you.